Here, amidst lush Cheshire grassland, is where traditional crumbly cheese has its roots. The counties either side of the English-Welsh border are renowned for flavoursome Cheshire, Caerphilly, Wensleydale and Lancashire cheeses, and Reece's of Malpas are famed for the quality of the crumbly territorial cheeses which they produce using techniques unchanged for nearly 100 years. Reece's are allocated milk from 85 farms in the Cheshire area, but they are able to draw in milk from other areas when available. 4 of these 9,000-litre milk tankers deliver to the factory 4 or 5 times each day between 8:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. Two pasteuriser operators alternate on weekly shifts between 2 to 10 a.m. and 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to handle the reception of milk and its pasteurisation. The milk is sampled and tested for temperature prior to being pumped to insulated holding silos before being pasteurised as required for production. After pasteurisation, the milk passes into the cheese vats, where a specially cultured starter is added to commence the cheese-making process. Starter for Reece's cheese is made on the premises and is kept in liquid form prior to use. The temperature is critical during the ripening process. The vats of milk are constantly stirred by these paddles and, depending upon the recipe, a natural colouring compound, annatto, may be added. Ripening takes 1 to 1.5 hours, and then rennet is added to coagulate the milk and form a junket-like curd. This takes about 30 minutes, and an experienced cheesemaker will test for the correct consistency with the back of his hand or a finger. The paddles are replaced by knives to cut the curds for 5 to 10 minutes until the individual pieces are the correct size and well separated. After scalding and stirring for up to half an hour, the acidity of the curds and the liquid whey mixture is now tested. And when exactly the right moment is reached, the curds and whey are transferred through this pipe to long draining tables, known as coolers. The whey is now steadily drained away from the curds, which are constantly examined and tested by Reece's experienced cheesemakers to ensure that the acidity is developing. This is a very labour-intensive part of the process, for the curds need to be turned and separated constantly to ensure that the whey is properly expelled from the cheese. The curds are arranged along the sides of the cooler to facilitate the draining of whey. Finally, the last of the whey is drained off. The texture of the curd is vital to the quality of the cheese. Again, the experienced hand and eye is the best test. After 1.5 hours, when this sample was taken, the curds should be matting together well and have an open chicken breast texture. The cheese is now salted and broken by hand to ensure even mixing of the salt, after which the milling process begins. The operators break the curd and shovel it into the mill. The milled curd is then mixed. The production process is so arranged as to ensure that the coolers each come up to the milling stage in strict rotation. The moulds in which the individual cheeses will be formed have been cleaned prior to reassembly, lined with their cheesecloths and brought into the cheese room for the milled curd to be loaded. The filled moulds are then carried through to an opening in the cheese room wall, giving access to the press room. The moulds are all individually weighed and then given a brief pre-press prior to being loaded into these horizontal cheese presses, each capable of holding 30 cheese moulds. The cheeses will stay under pressure for 1 to 2 days while the final moisture is expelled and the curds fuse together. However, attention to the detail of the recipe and the skill exercised by the cheesemaker in timing the various stages of the process has ensured that the resulting cheeses will all have the crumbly texture and sharp, clean taste that these territorial varieties are famous for. Throughout the day, and at the end of each day's cheese-making operations, all plant is thoroughly and systematically cleaned prior to the new make. Absolute hygiene and high standards of bacteriological cleanliness are essential if high-quality cheese is to be made consistently. Reece's cheese-making process is also very efficient, using virtually all of the milk. Converting the curds into cheese, then the surplus containing fat is collected, clarified and transported by road to another factory within the Express Foods group to be turned into whey butter and whey powder, a commercial food ingredient. Our cheeses are now coming to the end of their time in the presses and are carefully removed, still in their moulds, and taken to the knockout room where they are to be removed from the steel mould. But each batch is sampled at this point by removing a small plug of cheese with this cheese iron. To the skilled cheesemaker, a sniff is enough to tell that this cheese is of top quality. The process of removal of the cheeses from the moulds is known as knocking out, and the moulds are then cleaned for the next day's make. Meanwhile, the cheese itself passes into the packing room, where it is first trimmed, wrapped in saran film, and then waxed paper. After identifying marking, the wrapped cheese passes through a heat sealer before being packed in a carton outer to protect it in storage and dispatch. Reece's cold store is capable of holding 8,000 cheeses, and they're held, on average, for 21 days before being loaded onto road trunkers for transport to nearby Express Foods Oswestry, the pre-packing centre for all the Express Foods Group's cheeses for retail sale. The techniques you have seen have been in use for the best part of a century, and the factory shown here was recently replaced by a modern creamery, working to the same traditional recipes, but employing modern labour-saving devices to ensure that Reece's of Malpas still make traditional cheeses of the finest quality.